So, Pacific Rim Uprising. Now, I wasn't a fan of the first Pacific Rim. Like, I mean, I thought it was fine. Like, it wasn't anything that I loved or hated. I thought that it was just average fluff, but I feel like that's what they were intending it to be. They were intending it to be just a fun, dumb, over the top monster movie. Um, like the older monster movies. It was trying to be similar to that, where it's just stupid and fun. Um, and I thought it was completely just okay. Like it wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, it was just all right. Um, and then 5 years later, we get Pacific Rim Uprising, which, wow, this was awful. Like seriously, this was one of the I don't want to say disappointing because I didn't care much for the first one, but man, this was so hard to sit through. The whole movie was so, in terms of just being a sequel, I felt like this was as generic as could be, as bland as could be, um, in terms of how these types of movies are not very character oriented, and the first one wasn't either. But I felt like the first one did a better job at having more interesting actors. And John Boyega is good in this as the main guy, Jake, but like everybody else is just either adequate or they're just nothing. Like there's no development for these characters, and there's no great acting from anybody. Like I said, John Boyega and Scott Eastwood are the only ones that are okay. They're fine. They're not amazing, but they're fine in the movie. And the girl, I guess, was fine too, the main girl. But everybody else was just so bland and pointless, and the story was so haphazardly, like, bad in terms of how these characters meet. It starts with John Boyega going, like, he's the son of Idris Elba's character from the first movie, and um, it shows 10 years after what happened in the first one where the kaiju attacked, and he is living kind of on his own, and he meets the main girl in the movie too, that's kind of his sidekick. But they meet, and it's so quick and so weird, and they suddenly are friends immediately. And then you've got all these other characters, these other teenager characters who literally have no development and have all these random fights and occurrences that do not equal the screen time that they've had to have this happen. Like, there's a lot of shit that just happens for no reason. And all of the other side characters, the teenage characters, were so boring, and they had nothing. Like, they didn't have any plot. They were just there. They had no literal development at all. They were just there and fought. And it just was really stupid. And I think that even though the first one did that kind of similar thing too, where it had a lot of characters, I felt like a lot more of them were more charismatic in that one besides this, besides the select few, like I said. But besides the main three, like every other character is so boring and dumb, and like they don't have anything to them. And the only other side characters, like from the first one, um, are in it, like Charlie Day and the girl character from the first one, Charlie Hunnam's friend or the teammate that he was with in the first one. They both are in the movie, but they are barely in it. Charlie Day is more in it, like, but he's not. Like it's weird because some parts of these two are not important in the movie at all, and sometimes they're really important. And it's really weird how they kind of shrug off these two characters that were in the last one. And I'm wondering why didn't they even mention? And I don't remember for the first one if they died or not. But what happened to Charlie Hunnam's character and Ron Perlman's character? Are they still alive? They were. I don't think they were mentioned by name, either of them. And I thought that was really weird that they didn't even like point that out. Like that's a really weird occurrence in the movie. And the story is just very something you've seen before about these group of characters who are not developed at all go up against a monster. And I know I'm being way too harsh on this movie because this is a monster movie with a type of plot that does not require character development and is not going to be one that will be usually that typically. But I thought that in the first one they were way more charismatic. In this one there are so many more boring characters, so many like bland ones, and the movie itself is so bland. I think the humor was really, really terrible. Like I do every joke. I was, I was thinking to myself like, this is so like by the books jokes. For example, John Boyega and Scott Eastwood's character are talking, and Scott Eastwood is telling him something, and every time he starts saying something, John Boyega squirts whipped cream into his bowl for ice cream. And every time he does it, he interrupts him. Scott Eastwood starts talking again, interrupts him with the noise, interrupts him a couple more times. That has been done a billion times where they've got a character saying something, and then the comedic moment, somebody interrupts them by doing something. And that happens so many times, and I feel like this is the movie that made that coffin in the nail for me for that type of joke. And all the other jokes, I think, are just really, really bad. They don't equal. Like, they're not clever and they're not interesting at all. They just are there. And they felt very, like, sitcom kind of jokes where they were winking at the audience and they were not trying hard enough. And like I said, the first one does have humor to it. It was trying to be, it knows what it was. The first one was, but I felt like it was better made than this, and I felt like it was funnier than this, and I felt like this one just tried so hard to be something that was way worse than I anticipated. Like, I really didn't like this movie. I thought that it would have been all right, but even for me, I just couldn't even find really anything to gravitate towards besides the acting's all right, the visuals are all right. The visuals don't even like look as great in terms of like the colors in like the first one. Like the first one, I think I remember, even though I don't remember the movie very well, I remember so many images from the movie because of how beautiful it was. And this one is just all right in terms of how it looks. It's not anything special. It's not anything great, and that really sucks. And also, I felt like this movie was very, very similar to Independence Day Resurgence, which I thought was really terrible as well, but I thought it was worse than this. But Independence Day Resurgence, where these group of characters, years later after the first film, in this case it's 10 years, in Independence Day Resurgence it's 20 years since the first film, but a set number of years, a new kid characters of the characters from the last movie come in and fight the threat that has come back. And it felt very similar to that. It felt a tiny bit better, but it still was so bad in terms of how boring and bland it was, how these characters were. It reminded me so much of that because of how I felt in that movie, where it was so uninteresting with all of these characters and these bad jokes that to me were some of the most brainless jokes. And that's why I feel that similarity between the two, where it feels very similar. And also, not spoiling anything, but I feel like the last scene in this movie is the last scene in Independence Day Resurgence. And if you see both of them, you'll understand. I don't think you can see one and get what I'm talking about. You have to watch both the films. But I implore you not to. But they have the same like ending, and it like the same ending scene. And I thought they were both really stupid. And like I said, it's really dumb in terms of just being so bland and so interesting, and or so bland and uninteresting. And these characters and the how the movie looks and how the movie feels reminded me a lot of a Transformers movie. Like, it really reminded me so much of those 5 Transformers movies. And I'm gonna get shit for this, but honestly, I think they're both equally terrible, but Transformers 5 I'd rather watch than this. I thought they're both the same length pretty much, but I thought that in terms of after seeing 5 of them, after seeing 5 Transformers movies, I know what I'm getting into. I know it's going to be stupid shit. So watching the 5th one, I was like, okay, this is incredibly stupid. Of course it is, but I would rather sit through that. That at least has some beautiful shots to it. It has some beautiful imagery. Like, this one is just alright in its imagery. But both of these films as well, this and Transformers 5, have bad humor, bland characters that have nothing to give, and the acting doesn't help, even though a couple of them are fine. And in both of these movies, there's death scene. Well, maybe not in the fifth Transformers. I can't remember, but in these are similar types of movies in which a character, maybe an important character, dies, and then you don't get like a scene where they really like it matters. And this is one of those movies where it does that, where it's just like, oh, you're gonna kill somebody off. Well, it doesn't even matter. And I feel like that is a spoiler that somebody dies, and I shouldn't have said that. But I feel like if you really care enough, you'll see this movie, and there are people who probably do want to see this movie still and will like it, and that's totally fine. That's totally, if it's your bag, that's fine. But for me, man, this was insufferable to sit through, and I usually can find something even in a movie like this. But man, this was really one of the most disappointing sequels to a movie that I thought was okay to the first one. But man, that was really, really rough.